Well, good afternoon, and thank you for joining me. My name is John T. Vias II. I belong to TuneStop, the illustration brand focused on character design and business and mindset insights for the independent artist. This little housekeeping item, we've already gone over this. The panel's being recorded because we want people on YouTube to be able to maybe hopefully gain some insights from this. Now, as always, love to talk to you about my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ on a volunteer basis, separate from today's focus, how to be a successful artist. I love doing this panel. It's always great when wonderful, productive conversations happen as a result of it. And we start by looking at success. What even is it? The simplest dictionary definition I was able to find for that is the accomplishment of an aim or purpose. So you focused on something and you did it. So how to be a successful artist is to apply that definition to our artistic concepts. Accomplish an aim or purpose within the scope of an artistic discipline. So now we know what success means for an artist, at least from what it is from a noun perspective, verb perspective, whatever string of words that is. So now we get to define success. What is the aim or purpose you wish to accomplish as an artist? Now that's going to be a challenging thing to deal with because art is a broad discipline. Incidentally, so is music. And there's a lot of wonderful examples in terms of mindset that we can pull from that. In fact, I've got one right now, an example we have from music. These two are familiar. Yes? Guest stars at the convention, Camille and Kennerly, known as the Harp Twins, that's their branding. What do they play? They play the harp. I've seen them pull out a couple other instruments, like as accompaniment specifically for a video, but we know them specifically for the harp. The harp is how they built their business. Successful musicians don't have to be good at every single musical instrument. You can be good at one instrument, really good at one instrument, and do something interesting with it, and then you have an entire career. So we apply that logic to our school of thought as the artists. We choose our instrument and then learn what you have to do to become great with that instrument, which admittedly is a little bit nebulous yet as a concept, but we'll figure that out here shortly. The important thing is you need to think of one thing you want to do as an artist. As broad or as narrow as you like, but you got to think about one thing. You're going to focus on one thing long enough to achieve your definition of success. Anything worth doing is going to be worth doing for at least a little while. You can't do something and be discouraged by not being good enough or being bad at it when you're too soon into the game. Most people don't accomplish the things they think about until they've gotten a number of hours into their craft, whatever their craft happens to be. You make costumes, for example. There's a lot of things you're going to have to learn about the different kinds of stitches, different kind of materials, what stitches and materials play nice together, what chemicals you can put on those materials, how rough you can be with those materials, how gentle you have to be. And it takes a lot of doing to figure out exactly how well that's going to hold up when you take that costume to a convention and it inevitably falls apart that first trip around. But you still learn something. The same thing applies for your writing, your drawing, anything else. You have to do it long enough to, number one, even figure out if you can work with your definition of success, and number two, to even achieve it. Having said that, invest enough time for discovery, but be open to trying new things if the first thing doesn't work out. It's okay to say no to something if you find out that something else is simply better for your tastes and proclivities. In the process of writing something, you might discover that, maybe writing isn't for me. But I sure did have a great time drawing the cover because I can't hire a person to draw this cover. Maybe I'll invest in art instead. These are the terms that I usually work with when it comes to thinking about niches and specialties inside the visual arts. Concept art, modeling and sculpture, illustration, comics, animation, painting, graphic design. Each discipline can be applied to different genres or concepts. and your skills and ideas probably overlap somewhere that you are especially qualified to design cool things. Now, going back to our example from earlier, we know Camille and Kennerly play the harp, but what helped make them kind of a big deal was less that they were doing the normal things people do with harps. As I understand it, they experimented with playing classic rock songs on the harp, and that tickled people in a very special way. So they kept doing that, and that advanced them forward in the craft and let them do more of the things that they care about in a broad sense. Not just playing covers of Black Sabbath, even though that is very cool and based. What I'm getting at is, this is not playing nice with me. What I'm getting at is, it may take a little bit of time, but you can discover how your craft overlaps with things that you care about, ideas you're interested in, things that you have strong convictions about, whether on the simply this is a cool thing I want to make, or these are some important social things I want to talk about. Your skills and your ideas overlap somewhere that resonates with a lot of people, and it simply takes some time to discover that and do it long enough to get the attention you want. Now, once you've selected your niche, once you've found out what your discipline is, it's time to set clear goals. You're not going to be a successful artist with unclear goals. But then that gets into the question of, well, what's an appropriate goal for me? What makes sense for me and what's important to me and how I want to spend my time? Well, the good news is it's not that difficult to find out if you're willing to ask yourself a few questions. Making a living, achieving mastery, communicating a message, having a big body of work, being known in your specific discipline, whether you work for yourself or someone else. This is what I call, these are what I call the elements of the success matrix. How important each of these are to you. Is anybody, the best example I can think of, had you ever seen the statistics chart for a stand from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure? Like that hexagonal one that shows like what the specs are for that, for the stand. Overlap this on that. It's kind of like that expanding octagon shape matrix answering each of these questions. And we'll go over them in slightly different order here in just a second. The first one that I think really has the bearing on anything else you would think about doing as an artist is going to be the question of achieving mastery. You're going to have to be good at something. You're going to have to be at least a little bit good at the thing you care about, whatever that thing is. Now, that's a worthy goal all of its own, and like I said, it's necessary in some measure, no matter what other metrics of success you evaluate by. Unless you're simply creating for yourself and no one else, which is perfectly fine and valid. Nothing's wrong with that. Just be real with yourself about it. And when you understand mastery, what that looks like in your field, you're going to have a roadmap for your goals. And concrete examples of mastery exist for most art disciplines. Nobody's really doing anything new, which sounds a little discouraging on the face of it, but what that really means is if you have a mind to make something, somebody else has probably done it. So that means the answers are there for what that mastery looks like inside of that. Examples of mastery exist, so therefore do paths to mastery. Most people who have done a creative work like sharing how they did it. Sometimes they want money in exchange for those secrets, but there's not really a single creative thing you can do where there's not some kind of information and clear roadmap to the level of mastery you need for your definition of success. Now, after achieving mastery, you want to think about making a living. Now, if you want your art to provide for you, figure that out one way or another. It's okay if the answer is no, that's valid to choose. In fact, I would say that people who are creating without any thought of money attached to it usually have a bit more pure of an experience. But if you want to make a living, your art needs to be worth more than somebody else's money. It's not that difficult. It's not that difficult to make something that's worth more than somebody else's money. Now, if you want a corporation's money, this is the bar. Corporations, with any kind of creative thing going on, they publish art books like that. You have to be at least as good as or better than what they put together in the book. And not just in terms of being able to draw pictures, but also all the thought and reasoning behind those pictures. I like to use this as an example just because I've followed Mark Brunet, one of the senior artists for Overwatch, for a long time. And he makes it clear what you need to have if you want this kind of thing for yourself. You got to be good. You got to be really good. And what you're good at's got to make money for that company. Usually they're going to tell you what they want you to be good at in that job description. But that's not the only way. Direct-to-consumer is viable and becomes more and more viable every single day. Over time, it becomes pretty clear that your AAA creative places might be starting to play it a little bit too safe for the tastes of consumers at large. So that's where you come in with everything you think is important and your understanding of the world around you and your understanding of your own audience. You still need skill, but if you can impress about 1,000 people to give you $100 a year, yep, that's $100,000 if you can make that work. Now, financial success as an artist is not going to be glamorous in most cases, but it's viable and realistic and achievable for most people, as long as you're willing to be thoughtful and real with yourself about what you can make and what's going to be in touch with the people who would spend money on you. Next, we'll talk about communicating a message. It's going to supercharge your art with the power of personal resonance. If people look at something you've made and they can feel out something from their own life, something from their own heart and convictions about it, that's going to make them pay a little bit more attention to what you've made. It's going to make them think, oh yeah, they get me. Are they going to continue to get me? Decide how important a good message is in your own personal metric of success, and do enough work to cause people to remember your message. Now, when I say that, that doesn't necessarily mean that everything you ever make is going to be a propaganda piece. What I mean by that is who you are as a person has a bearing on the kind of things that you make. Lean into that. People like it when they come to grips with a piece of art that feels real because the person who made it wasn't afraid to put themselves into it. Now, some artists place their craft entirely under the service of a message. It's not a wrong thing, but you veer into the territory of propaganda, and that can make it a little bit tasteless for some consumers. Good ideas contribute to your culture, and art is a valid way to do that. And it's going to make you feel good to do it, too, if you have what you believe are worthwhile ideas and get people talking about them and paying attention to them. But you're going to have to understand clearly the relationship between your message and just how good at art you have to be. You know, we think about comics, for example. Newspaper comics is a common one. You know, we can think about things that have gone back 50, 70, 80 years. When we see a comic, we have the instinct to stop and maybe read it if the art catches our eye. And then suddenly we're paying attention to what that person wanted to say. Whether it was a joke or some big earth-shattering revelation, you cause them to stop and pay attention. That means something. It's worthwhile to think about that when you think about the things that you make and what you would want to say through a piece of work. Now, if you choose to forego the question of message or story in your art, just remember, number one, it's impossible to completely divorce the two. And the less you have any kind of story or message in your piece, the higher, like exponentially, I would say, your requirement for mastery goes up, for people to stick down and want to stick around and see what a piece of art is about if there's nothing going on to grab them from a story or thought perspective. Next is the concept of the respectable body of work. You might have heard about this, you might not have. There's a story of two potters. One was given the objective, I want you to make the most perfect pot you can make for me, and the other potter was told, make me as many pots as humanly possible. The potter, the one who spent weeks on the most perfect pots, they made a few okay pots. They made some good work. The potter that cranked out as many as he could became better faster. In the process of making a lot of pieces of work, they became better at the work because they finished more pieces and learned more about what they were doing wrong and how to be better, how to do better, how to make things they could be proud of. They made better pots than the other guy. In the question of a respectable body of work, then, how much art does it take to be successful? Enough art to achieve mastery. Enough art to sell and make the right kind of money. Have something new, have something thoughtful, have something people want to engage with. Enough art to get the right person's attention, enough art to make your message stick. In every single case, getting better, making money, having enough work to get the attention of the right person, having enough work to get someone to remember you, make more art, not less. More art, not less. Don't get hung up on perfection. Worry reasonably about being good at what you're doing. Worry reasonably about doing better every single time you make something. But don't get stuck and twisted up inside yourself and get slowed down. Next is the question of notoriety in your field, how well known you are. Does success for you mean that people instantly recognize your work? Now, self-gratification in art, like I said before, perfectly valid. But if you have professional goals, it's going to require at least a little bit of notoriety. People need to remember you if you've got goals a little bit bigger than just making things that you like. Now, this one is more a question of how you need to approach your marketing. Notoriety means posting things people remember. It means posting often enough that you're remembered and doing both of those things for long enough to attract the attention of the correct people. Think about your favorite artist, your favorite costumer, your favorite author, your favorite YouTuber, and think about, why is it that they have real estate inside your brain? Why is it that you think about them and they are not paying rent? They earned it with time, effort, and study. They kept making things until they were good enough. They kept making things until people started paying attention. They kept making things until they understood the relationship between what they believe in and what people wanted to hear. And it took a while. Most of my favorite artists, they've been at the game for a decade or more before people started paying attention to them. And that's encouraging in a way, because that lets you know that it's going to take you a while and that's not going to be a problem. You simply have to be willing to stick it out until you start taking up real estate in the minds of the people that you want to be remembered by. It's like the funny little Japanese man out fishing in the sea. Never give up. Next, we talk about who you're going to work for, yourself or someone else. This is an interesting one to look at, just because of the nature of office jobs as an artist, and I've had to have this conversation with myself and with other creative people years over and over and over. Office jobs as an artist, few and far between, incredibly discriminate in skill requirement. Remember the Art of the Overwatch book that we looked at? And commonly geographically restricted. It's a little bit less so now, but most of the time, if you go to work for Blizzard, for example, they want you to go to California and be in the office and participate in keeping the work secure. They're few and far between, incredibly discriminate skill requirement, geographically restricted, and actively being fought for by somebody else qualified for the seat. There is one in any situation where you see one opening for junior artist at Blizzard or Square Enix or MiHoYo or whoever you'd want to work for, there's millions of people who want that seat. And with that, the office jobs for artists are a little more secure, a little easier to process idea-wise because you're getting assignments and not having to think up everything by yourself. But they're scarce and subject to somebody else's rules. For good and for bad. There's protections, but there's accountability. In some cases, accountability that you might not want to be subject to, depending on, depending on what kind of maverick you are as a creator. You can be your own boss, and it's not necessarily easier or harder. It's different in terms of how that's going to work out and make you money. It's more administrative responsibility. You have to do the taxes. You have to do the billing. You have to do the accounting, the more marketing responsibility. You have to be responsible for getting your art in front of people. And that is a challenge. That is difficult to get people to think about you and remember you the same way that other people are getting thought about and remembered when they're being helped by Warner Brothers or Disney or whoever else has a marketing department and plenty of money to spend on getting their artists in front of everybody. And when you work for yourself, though, it might be a little bit richer because other people aren't taking the cut from your money from the work. It might be a little less stable because you're basically working on the charity and good feelings of people around you, but it's a little bit more free. Setting your hours, working on things you care about, being a little bit more in touch with your audience, being a little bit more in touch with the people who consume and appreciate your work and what they're looking for from you. Self-employed artists of all kinds exist. Why, if you go down that hall over there, I don't know what it is by percentages, but it's at least half full with self-employed artists who are doing all right for themselves because they were willing to do the work and be responsive and be attentive and make things that people care about. What that means, like with the question of mastery, there is a self-employed artist doing something that you want to do, and 9 times out of 10, they don't mind sharing their secrets. They don't mind helping other people out. They might get a little bit squirrely about it if you end up sharing an artist alley and competing for the same people's money, but most people want to help each other out. Good self-employment in your niche and your specialty, if that's what you want, it's out there. All you got to do is do the homework, do the work. Just get there one way or another. For most people who are willing to do the work, it's out there. So what now? We have our metrics of success, each of which can be singular goals you want to think about and work toward and barrel toward all by themselves. But in most cases, they're elements of a vision, not the vision by themselves. Each of the elements of success is part of a set of questions you answer about your own creative journey and how that applies to your craft and your niche and your ideas and what you care about. Ask yourself each question and be realistic about both what you want and what your competency is. Tell yourself the truth so you can give yourself the best chance and the best advice and best directions. And so ask yourself your questions. Do one thing at a time until you're good at it, and then do the next thing. One thing at a time, through the list of questions, through the list of things that are important to you. So, a lot to process, a lot to chew on, a lot to think about. A lot of things in there that are probably really, really specific down to each of your situations and needs. And the good news about that is we're coming up on my favorite part of the show, which is questions and answers. Think about what's really important to you, and maybe, not just me talk to you, but other people share ideas. I always get great conversations in these panels. But that's going to be private between you and me. You there, friends at YouTube, love to chat with you about your ideas of success and what's going on with your creative journey. We'll see you in the comments section. Y'all take care.